My name's Steve, and I'm 55 years old. I own a garage, but what makes it special is that I built it from scratch. I started working when I was just 18. Back then, I worked for my uncle for 7 years, saving every penny I could. Eventually, I had enough to start my own business. Those early years were tough, really tough. I poured everything I had into making it work, and over the next 30 years, it grew into what it is today. Did I fall in love along the way? I sure did. Her name was Rachel. We met at an auto show while she was still in college. There was this instant connection, like sparks flying. We exchanged numbers and agreed to meet up again, but since we lived in different cities, we could only talk over the phone for a while. A few months later, we saw each other again, and that time she came to my place. She was amazing, and knowing it was her first time made it even more special. Not long after, Rachel's parents passed away. She was struggling emotionally, and her ability to stay in school was at risk. I knew in my heart she was the one. So I stepped in and used my savings to help her continue her education. She was so overwhelmed that she broke down in tears and hugged me tightly. 5 years later, she moved in with me and landed a job as a lawyer at a nearby firm. One beautiful Sunday, we went hiking. After a 3-hour climb, we reached the top of the hill, with the whole city sprawled out beneath us. That's when Rachel did something I never expected. She got down on one knee and proposed. Of course, I said yes. We got married 3 weeks later in a small, intimate ceremony. I still remember her slipping the ring on my finger and saying, "From this day forward, you're mine forever." The next 20 years were incredible. We had 2 amazing kids, Sophia, now 19, and Jacob, who's 18. Sophia's finishing her degree at university, and Jacob plays lead guitar in a local rock band. Now that both kids have moved out, I feel this deep sense of satisfaction with how my life has turned out. I've always been seen as a bit of a tough guy, a blue-collar worker who never went to college. But that never bothered me. What did bother me was the change I started noticing in Rachel after 2 decades of marriage. I knew her inside and out, how she thought, how she acted, and even how she lied. She'd taken a new job about a year earlier, and suddenly, she was working late all the time. The job came with more money and glamour, but her boss, a high-profile lawyer with a flashy reputation, rubbed me the wrong way. Still, I never thought I'd have to deal with him personally. For 3 months, I watched her behavior closely. Something didn't add up. Finally, I decided to confront her. I'm usually pretty easygoing, but that day was different. Rachel had never seen me like that. I pressed her hard, asking about all the late nights and the excuses. After 20 minutes of back and forth, she broke down, tears streaming down her face, and admitted what I'd been dreading. She had been sleeping with her boss. I sat there, running one simple question over and over in my head. Why? This was the same woman I'd married 2 decades ago. Rachel hadn't changed, hadn't upgraded. As she put it, she still wore the same plain clothes, carried herself the same way. Now, suddenly, I wasn't good enough. "I want more," she said bluntly. "I need someone I can introduce at parties without feeling embarrassed. You don't take charge, Steve. You agree to everything I say, never stepping up or acting like the alpha male I need." I looked at her, the disbelief sinking in deeper with every word. "So, after 25 years of loyalty, you're leaving me because I'm not some aggressive, domineering husband? Because I don't treat you like dirt?" I asked, trying to wrap my head around it. "Haven't I been good to you? I helped you finish law school, put our 2 kids through college. And now, none of that's enough." Rachel's expression hardened, and she squared her shoulders. "You need to understand, Steve. This is just how it is. I'm moving forward with David, and you should come to terms with it. If you don't, I'll make sure you lose everything. The garage, the house, everything you worked for. I'll take it all in the divorce." She said it so casually, like it was a done deal. "If you fight me on this, you'll spend the rest of your life tangled in legal battles." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "You really think you can just take everything I built by cheating your way through this? Good luck with that," I said, chuckling as she tried to cut me off. I didn't stick around to hear more. I stood up and walked out of the house, leaving her standing there. The next morning, Rachel was already at the house when I stepped out to head to work. I watched from the driveway as she picked up her phone the second I drove off. "Hey, David," I heard her say as I lingered just out of sight. Her voice sounded strained. "Yeah, I know. I look awful. Steve found out. He confronted me this morning, and I told him everything." David's voice crackled faintly on the other end, but I could make out the worry. "That's not ideal," he said. "We talked about this, but I guess it was inevitable. Still, it stings, huh?" Rachel sighed, leaning against the porch rail. "Yeah, it does. We've been together for 25 years, married for 20, raised 2 kids. I didn't expect it to hit me this hard." "What did you say to him?" David asked, his voice calm. "Exactly what we planned," she replied. "I didn't bother trying to lie. Told him the truth. How I've been married to a mechanic my whole adult life, and I wanted something more. I said I needed someone who could stand beside me, not someone who just went along with whatever I wanted. You know, an alpha male." David chuckled. "Did you at least give him credit for the garage and the kids' tuition?" Rachel hesitated. "Yeah, I mentioned it. I said he had his own business and worked hard to provide for us. But when Steve started reminding me of everything he did, how he supported me emotionally and financially, it felt hollow, you know?" David's voice softened. "Did you warn him about the divorce? That if he didn't play ball, the firm would crush him in court?" "I did," Rachel admitted. "But he didn't seem to care. He just kept repeating how loyal he'd been, like that mattered. It hurt, David. I tried explaining that I wasn't leaving him behind. I just wanted something more for myself. But I don't think he believed me." "Rachel, you told me you loved me," David said with mock offense. "Said I took you places Steve hadn't in years." She laughed nervously. "I know, but Steve's been part of my life for so long. I don't know, David. I don't want to lose him completely." David's voice dipped low, a little extra on the side. "Huh? I'm not sure I like that." Rachel went quiet. I didn't stick around to hear the rest. I'd heard enough. "Didn't you say you'd never had sex like that before?" David asked. Rachel let out a soft sigh. "Yeah, I did, David. But you know, when I married Steve, I wasn't exactly experienced. He was always gentle with me. You're different. You're intense, demanding. It just pulled me in." David's chuckle came through the phone loud and clear. "And I'll keep pulling you in, sweetheart. Your husband's going to have to deal with the fact that you've added a little spice to your life. He's no longer the top dog. I'd hate to think I wrecked a 25-year marriage, though." Rachel laughed nervously. "Well, too late for that. Tell you what," David continued. "I'll draft some papers and swing by to see him this afternoon. Just leave me the address to his garage." "What kind of papers?" she asked, sounding wary. David's tone stayed light but firm. "Anything I can cook up. Restraining orders to keep him away from you, me, and the house. I'll freeze his business accounts if I can. You know how this works. We flood him with enough legal jargon and threats to make his head spin. By the time I'm done, your little hobby won't know what hit him. He'll learn who the real alpha is." By the time David showed up at my garage, it was creeping up on 2 in the afternoon. He strolled in like he owned the place. "Mr. Wilson, can I have a moment?" he asked, his voice dripping with that fake professional charm. "I know who you are," I replied, barely looking up from the engine I was working on. "Perfect," David said, setting his briefcase down on the counter. "That saves us both some time. I assume Rachel filled you in on the nature of our arrangement this morning. What she may not have mentioned is why you'll accept it." I wiped my hands on a rag and glanced his way. "You see, Steve, I own the firm Rachel works for. I've got over 20 lawyers at my beck and call, and I handpicked every one of them based on their stellar track records. Half of them specialize in divorce law, and I won't hesitate to sick them all on you." He popped open the briefcase with a smug grin. "This here is the paperwork I was preparing this morning. Let me break it down for you. First up, we've got a petition for divorce, already signed by your wife, as you can see. Next is a motion to freeze your company's assets until a settlement is finalized. Oh, and this one's fun. It gives you 24 hours to vacate the house you two shared. And these," he said, pulling out another stack, are 4 restraining orders. You'll need to stay at least 200 meters away from Rachel, me, her home, and the office. He leaned closer, dropping his voice. So, Stevie boy, how do you think this will play out? I'll tie you up so tight in legal red tape that you won't be able to move. You'll burn through every dime just trying to hire the cheapest lawyer you can find. And at the end of it all, Rachel will still be mine. David straightened his tie, clearly enjoying himself. Look, I get it. You're bigger, stronger than me. But let's be real. Brawn hasn't ruled the world for a long time. Brains took over, Steve. And if you were enough for Rachel, we wouldn't be standing here now, would we? I crossed my arms, staring him down. Is that your whole pitch? David smiled, his confidence unwavering. It doesn't have to go this way. We can keep things just like they've been for the past 4 months. I'll take Rachel when I feel like it, and she can come home to you when she's in the mood. No need to rock the boat. One day, I'll grow tired of her, and she'll be all yours again. Sound fair? He closed the briefcase with a snap. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be, Steve. If you were all she needed, we wouldn't be having this conversation, right? I didn't say a word. I just let the weight of his arrogance hang in the air. I suggest you take this as an opportunity for growth, Steve. Embrace it. Maybe even see it as a learning experience, David said, adjusting his cufflinks like he was doing me a favor. But if I can offer you one piece of advice, buddy, be more assertive with your wife. Not with sweet talk or charm, but by being the alpha male. Tell her how things are going to play out just like I did with you. That's how I took her from you. I gave him a hard stare. Finished yet? David smirked. I can tell, just like most guys these days, you don't really get what being an alpha male means. Do you want a mechanic to explain it to you? He chuckled. Go ahead, tough guy. Enlighten me. I sighed. You know, they say a picture's worth 1,000 words. With that, I stepped forward and drove my right fist square into his smug face. There was a sickening crunch of cartilage and teeth giving way. David collapsed against the wall, his eyes wide with shock. Blood was already dripping from his nose. Consider that illustration number 1, I said calmly. Before the pain really had a chance to settle in, I grabbed him by the collar and yanked him to his feet. An uppercut to the gut sent him crumpling to the ground again, this time gasping for air like a fish out of water. That's number 2, I added. David barely had time to register what happened before my steel-toe boot found his outstretched hand. I felt the bones crack beneath the weight. He let out a sharp cry, clutching his wrist as tears welled in his eyes. Now that, I said, is illustration number 3. Before he could roll away, I stomped hard against his chest, hearing the unmistakable snap of ribs breaking beneath my foot. David wheezed, too weak to cry out this time. And 4, I muttered, planting my boot firmly on his sternum. Now, if you could quit squealing for a minute, I'm trying to teach you something here. I crouched slightly, keeping my foot pressed against his chest to make sure he stayed put. You know, when I was younger, I made a promise to myself. I swore I'd never use my size or strength to bully people. But congratulations, you managed to make me break that promise today. I wasn't even going to involve you in this mess. I figured Rachel's choices were her own, and I'd leave you out of it. But then you had to come in here and rub my nose in it. I pressed my boot lightly against his throat, just enough to get his full attention. His eyes darted nervously, the pain temporarily forgotten. Even a gentleman has his limits, I said quietly. Now let's get back to your lesson. You like throwing around alpha male, like it's some title you gave yourself. You know where that term comes from? Wolves. The alpha isn't just the biggest or the smartest. He's the most ruthless. He leads the pack because he's willing to kill without hesitation. That's the part you don't seem to grasp. David's face flushed, but he kept his mouth shut for once. In your cushy little office, you might feel like the king of the hill. But out here, I shook my head. You're just another pretender. And let me give you some free advice. Don't go around bragging about how clever you are. You didn't even bring a witness. That wasn't smart, David. That was careless. I stepped back, letting him suck in shallow breaths. Now let's think about what happens next, I continued. Option 1, you go to the cops. Sure, maybe they arrest me. Maybe they don't. Even if they do, I could get out on bail. Or maybe I sit for a while. Who knows? There's a lot of maybes in that plan. Worst case, I spend a few years in prison. Pick up some new skills. Learn how to hurt people better, hide bodies smarter. I crouched down beside him, watching his swollen face carefully. Your call, David. But keep in mind, the worst thing you can do is teach a man like me how to be dangerous. David didn't respond. He just lay there, trembling, as I stood up and dusted off my hands. And once I wrap up that little apprenticeship, we'll have ourselves another conversation just like this one, I said, staring down at David. Or, you could chalk this up as a lesson, consider it part of life's education. One of those things that happens when you mess with another man's wife. Learn from it. I nudged him with my boot. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got a mess to clean up. Thanks for bleeding all over my damn workshop floor. Real classy, David. Alpha my ass. That evening, Rachel called David. Her voice was calm, almost impatient. David, I'm still waiting at the office. What's going on? I thought you'd be back ages ago. David groaned into the receiver. I just spent 3 hours in the ER. They've got me in another ward now. Rachel's tone shifted immediately. What happened? Were you in an accident? No, David muttered. I misjudged your husband. Thought I could handle him. He exhaled sharply. Turned out I was wrong. Steve broke my nose, my left hand, a few ribs, maybe even my cheekbone. There was silence on the other end. I don't believe you, Rachel finally said. Steve's never been violent. Not once in 25 years. Well, believe it, David snapped. I'll send you the x-rays if you need proof. I can't wrap my head around this. What can I do to keep you from going to the cops? She asked, her voice trembling. I know we brought this on ourselves, but Steve doesn't deserve prison for it. David let out a dry laugh. Relax. The police already showed up. I told them I was hit by a car, some hit-and-run nonsense. Your sweet, patient husband made sure I knew what would happen if I pressed charges. He made it clear this is just the down payment. Rachel gasped. You're really that scared of him? David sighed. I'm not taking the risk, Rachel. I'm done. I'm keeping my mouth shut. I can't believe this, she whispered. Steve wouldn't hurt a fly. If you don't believe me, I'll send the scans. Look, I'm doped up on painkillers and they're kicking in. I gotta go. The next day, Rachel showed up at David's hospital room. David, you have to help me, she said, standing nervously by his bedside. David opened his eyes with a groggy expression. What now? Last night, I was driving around until almost 8. I didn't feel safe going home, she confessed. I called Steve, but he wouldn't answer. When I finally went back, the locks were changed. Couldn't get inside. I ended up staying at my sister's. David shifted, wincing as he tried to sit up. Rachel continued, her words spilling out. This morning, I checked our bank accounts. Everything's frozen. Credit cards too. We have no money, David. You need to help me. David frowned. You want me to get one of the divorce attorneys to file a temporary order to kick Steve out of the house? Yes, please, Rachel pleaded. And could I stay with you for now? David's eyes narrowed. Are you serious? I don't have anywhere else to go, she said, her voice cracking. David let out a long breath. Rachel, no. I'm not getting involved any further. If I touch company resources to help you, Steve's going to have another reason to come after me. I'm not going through that again. Rachel's face paled. David, you can't just abandon me. He hesitated. I'm not abandoning you. I'm letting you go. Effective immediately, you're terminated. I'll pay you 4 weeks of severance if you pack up and leave today. If you see Steve, let him know you no longer work for the firm. Rachel's eyes widened. David, you're firing me? David met her gaze without flinching. I'm protecting myself. Steve cleaned house, Rachel. I'm not about to lose everything for you. Rachel took a shaky breath, her desperation creeping into her voice. I have no money, no job, And now, no help from you? David simply looked away. I'm sorry, Jen, David mumbled. You didn't see the look on Steve's face when he laid into me. I'm just doing what I have to. Rachel's eyes narrowed. Funny, she said coldly. Yesterday you were strutting around, bragging about being some alpha male. But today you're trembling like a child, scared my husband's hiding under your bed. Steve's 10 times the man you are, and now I see how pathetic you really are. She crossed her arms, glaring at him. Honestly, I don't know what I was thinking. How could I have possibly believed trading Steve for you was some kind of upgrade? And for the record, if you ever thought I was serious about you, you were deluding yourself. That same day, Jennifer Wilson sat quietly in her car, parked along the side of the road. Her credit cards were declined, her cash was gone, and the gas tank was nearly empty. It was only a matter of time before the car sputtered out completely. I hadn't thought to cancel her phone, or maybe I had. Maybe it was just one last cruel touch. Either way, Rachel was driving toward the city where our kids lived, hoping to find some refuge. She started calling them around 10 a.m. Over the years, they'd never taken more than an hour to call her back. But this time, nothing. No messages. No return call. Later that afternoon, I saw her on the side of the road, standing next to her dead car, thumbing for a ride. The sight of her standing there, with nothing but a useless purse, almost made me laugh. Rachel glanced up as I pulled over in my old van. Her eyes widened in shock, and for a second, she looked ready to run. But her legs wouldn't move. She stood frozen, staring as I climbed out. Get in, I said, motioning to the passenger seat. I wouldn't call myself an alpha male. I've always known better. Lone wolves don't fit that title. But I wasn't about to let Rachel twist the situation any further. As we drove, I kept it simple. Get the divorce paperwork ready, I told her. No alimony, no share of my assets. Everything I own stays with me. Rachel shifted uncomfortably but stayed quiet. We need to talk, I added. You can keep whatever you already own, but you're returning every piece of jewelry I ever bought you. File for divorce with whatever excuse you want. I don't care. As long as you stay out of my life, we're good. I glanced at her. Once the divorce is final, you leave the city. Don't come back. If the kids want to see you, that's between you and them, but it won't happen while I'm around. Rachel's face paled as I continued. By 10 tomorrow morning, your stuff will be packed up and sitting at the house. Come and get it. If it's not gone by 11, it'll be in ashes. Do I make myself clear? I asked. She gave a small nod, barely able to meet my eyes. When can I expect the papers? I pressed. A week, she whispered. 5 days. I shot back. Rachel nodded again, looking like she'd just seen a ghost. I stopped the van, gestured for her to get out, and drove away without another word. By 10:30 the next morning, her things were gone. 5 days later, she handed over the paperwork. The reason? Irreconcilable differences. I just smiled. A few months down the line, I was a free man. Did I regret the marriage ending? Sure. I regretted Rachel didn't understand what loyalty meant. I regretted she thought I wasn't good enough just because I didn't dress the part. What she never realized was that crossing a 6 feet 5 inches man wasn't something to take lightly, especially not one who could break bones if he had to. I might have tried to save our marriage. Maybe we could have talked things through. But Rachel threatened me. And for me, that's a point of no return. Now, I live alone and I probably always will. That's fine by me. Apex predators usually die alone. And to you, dear listener, if you've stuck with me this far, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. It helps more than you know.